Lord Jesus Christ, live out in us, in all that we are and have yet to become, the full mystery of your death and resurrection. Help us to yield all by showing us and teaching us to welcome all, especially the dark guest in our soul. Stretch and transform us by the power of your love, that we may find ourselves and see ourselves in you, in your beauty. Amen. Amen. Well, good morning. I'm Andrew Cooley. I was here 2 years ago as a supply priest, and I'm very grateful to be back today. And I'll be back in 2 weeks as Catherine is on her sabbatical, and grateful for her time to be away. I hope you had a wonderful 4th. I live with, my wife and I live in a big multi-generational house with our daughter and son-in-law and our 5-year-old grandson. And his parents were off camping this weekend, a long weekend, so my wife and I have been with our grandson. So we are exhausted and eager for them to come home. But we were, entertaining a 5-year-old, we went up to Orting for the 4th of July, a fun place for kids. And I noticed while we were there, a couple Mormon missionaries, 2 by 2 in their distinctive name tags and dress. And in fact, it was, and then on that bicycle trail that goes through Orting, up by the, there's just a spot where there's just a porta potty and not much more, but there were a couple Jehovah's Witnesses there with their kiosk and waiting for people who might approach them. They didn't say anything to me. I see that more and more at public places. And in fact, I just got back from Europe and the Jehovah's Witnesses at train stations and other places waiting to have conversations with people. And of course, that's what comes to mind as I think of the gospel passage that we just heard of Jesus instructing disciples to go out 2 by 2 and sending out laborers into the harvest. I used to be of a more evangelical stripe, and that idea of going out as missionaries to save souls is there's an awful lot of passion about that. And now that I'm an Episcopalian, that urgency of going out 2 by 2 doesn't quite seem to have the same compelling nature. I'm just not imagining Episcopalians going out. But then, you know, it was just a week ago, yesterday, the Pride March in Seattle attracted a lot of people, and including a lot of Episcopalians going out to bear witness in a public way. What does it mean for us? Do we have a message that is worth sharing to go out into the public sphere, to bear witness to something that is important? Well, certainly in our baptismal covenant, we have a couple of urgent statements to seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving our neighbor as ourselves, to strive for justice and peace and respect the dignity of every human being. And we live in difficult times where that seems to be an important message to share. Frankly, seeing immigrants and people marginalized living in great fear and distress. And what does it mean for us charged to see the dignity of every human being? How might we bear witness to that? Or to see LGBTQ persons who feel invisible and lost. What does it mean to see one another and to bear witness to the dignity of every human being and to love our neighbor as ourselves? Or frankly, our neighbor who flies a flag in their yard that doesn't necessarily reflect the views and sentiments that I hold. How do we have civil and meaningful discourse with people who hold opinions different than ourselves? It takes courage to speak up, and yet to do it in a way that isn't defensive, that isn't hostile, that isn't divisive, but in a way that respects other people, but yet bears witness to a truth that we hold dear. It's important to recognize that we have a message, and that message, in order to be shared, we need to summon some courage to be able to speak to what we know to be true. And how do we find that courage? Maybe as it suggests in the gospel, having a companion with us can help us. If we're not alone, if we both have someone with us, or that we just know that we're part of a voice, that others share these sentiments with us, can encourage us to speak up. And yet even so, our tongue can get tied. We can find it awkward and to be in conversation. But I think recognizing that we are part of a narrative that is bigger than ourselves is the key. One of the things that Jesus says in his instructions to those that are to go out, he says, carry no bag, no purse, take no sandals. There's a sense of traveling light, of traveling empty. The prayer that I said at the beginning of my sermon is a prayer that I've been praying every day, mostly, for 25 years. It's a prayer written by Frank Griswold, the one-time presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church. And it speaks to me of finding that narrative, finding that purpose in life that gives me courage. Live out in me and all that I am and have yet to become the full mystery of your death and resurrection. But then also that sense of letting go. Help me to yield all by showing me and teaching me to welcome all, especially that dark guest in my soul. Well, I had a wonderful sermon illustration that I was going to give you about being in a hot air balloon and a phrase called "wait off." And then I made the mistake, though, yesterday morning of listening to the radio, and on KUOW there's that show Hidden Brain with Shankar Vedantam. And he interviewed, or it was in a long conversation with a researcher by the name of Vic Strickle, I believe. But in the course of his conversation, Vic really shared a very tender part of his life about his daughter, a daughter who soon after birth was discovered to have, as he put it, a heart that was ruined. And then this is 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, the child was given a heart transplant. And then, but then 9 years later, even that heart was defective and then received a second heart transplant. And so he talked about just letting go of his priorities and understanding how important it was to give this child a full life. And then tragically, at 19, the daughter died suddenly of heart failure. Did any of you listen to that? It was really a very profound story, and I would commend it to you. You can find it as a podcast or going to the website for for NPR, Hidden Brain. But he talked about really a turning point in his life. He had been just overwhelmed with grief, and he had a profound, vivid dream of his daughter saying goodbye. And then he found himself soon after on a kayak out in Lake Michigan. And as he said, he had nothing to live for. And he was paddling, and Wisconsin was 80 miles away on the other side of the lake. And he was wondering about paddling on. And he said he had this moment of, it's as if his daughter's voice spoke within him and said, you need to get over this. You need to get over your ego. You need to get beyond your grief. You need to find something bigger than this to live for. And he was out on the lake. He thought for a while, and made the decision that he needed to turn back, not just to turn back to go to shore, but to turn in his life to a new way of thinking. And he came back and he wrote down priorities in his life and realized that a priority in his life was as a teacher, and his students were important, and that he could teach students as if his students were this daughter. What would he say to his students? And it really transformed the direction that his professional and academic life took, as well as his personal life. I really commend it to you. But it speaks really of the need to have a narrative in our life that is bigger than ourselves. That letting go of our ego is a difficult thing to do. He talked about the brain science, that people who have the ability to articulate a value bigger than themselves in their life, find that they are less prone to being stimulated by, in the brain, the amygdala, or sometimes called the reptilian brain, the part of the brain that is associated with fear and aggression. And on the other hand, people who articulate a strong sense of purpose in their life are more prone to have in their brain the medial ventricle precortex is activated, which is associated with thinking about the future and about a bigger picture. An interesting phrase that came up in that interview is that the reason why it's important to have a purpose bigger than ourselves is that, in fact, it is very selfish because we feel better. Our lives are healthier. Our lives have more meaning and purpose. When we have more meaning and purpose, our lives are richer. And we do it for selfish reasons. And I certainly believe that. So part of coming here, coming to church, is to find ourselves plugged into a narrative that helps us get out of ourselves and into something bigger than ourselves, to find courage. To paraphrase Shakespeare, Shakespeare said that the coward dies 1,000 deaths, but the valiant dies but once. Having courage enables us to do, as we say to our 5-year-old grandson, to do hard things. You can do hard things, we say to him. And maybe it's my role to say that here too. You can do hard things. And it's easier to do hard things when we have that narrative embedded into our life. So by coming here, finding ourselves engaged in common prayer, when we say, Our Father, when we say, we believe, when we say, we praise you, we bless you, we glorify you, that we recognize that we are connected to something much bigger than ourselves, and we find that voice that we might then bear witness to what God is doing. Let us take a moment now and just be aware of that spirit that we are a part of, bigger than ourselves, that is right here and right now. I'm going to invite you into an exercise that will end in silence. There'll be a minute of silence. Just let yourself be still in that time and recognize that you are connected to something. But right now, we're going to read a portion together of Psalm 46. And would you repeat these words? Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be.